The story unfolding in the heart of Manhattan, under the cloak of cold corporate ambition, is proof that life has a sense of justice more ruthless than any court of law. Richard Vance, the patriarch and CEO of the Atlas Group, an empire of technology and finance, believed his legacy was secure, forged in steel and cement, ready to be inherited by his legitimate son, Adrian. Richard was the magnate archetype, austere, silver-haired, with a gaze that appraised every person's worth in dollars and a complete aversion to anything that couldn't be quantified, especially emotion and weakness. He lived in a glass tower, isolated by his own success and an ancient, deep-seated fear, the fear of scandal. And it was this fear, this stain he tried to sweep under the rug 30 years ago, that was now returning, not as a ghost, but as the only force capable of dismantling everything he had built. The stage was set for the secret daughter he had disowned. The injustice, the starting point of this drama, began on a rainy night in Paris 3 decades ago. Elena Dubois, a talented and humble artist, confronted a young Richard, then merely an ambitious heir, with the news that she was pregnant. Richard, terrified by the threat that an illegitimate child by an unknown artist posed to his corporate ascent, showed no remorse. His response, carved into Elena's memory with the precision of a dagger, was the coldest phrase she had ever heard. "I don't have time for your weakness, Elena. The Vance family doesn't tolerate detours. Handle this. The money I'm giving you now is to ensure your silence, not your future. If you ever show up again, I will destroy your life and the life of any child you dare bring into this world." He left her there, in the rain, with a check and the certainty that wealth can be the cruelest of weapons. Elena, in her pain, did not accept the money. She accepted the pain and swore that her daughter Sofia would bear the Vance name, not through recognition, but through conquest. From that day on, Sofia would grow up with the burden of a rejected name and the mission to restore her mother's dignity. Sofia grew up in the shadow of the luxury she was denied, but never in the shadow of ignorance. Elena, who survived by selling her art on the streets, instilled in Sofia not blind hatred, but cold discipline and knowledge as tools for revenge. Sofia's plan was not emotional. It was an engineering project, a corporate assault planned over decades. She didn't want her father's approval. She wanted his throne, and the only way to conquer it was to prove herself superior to the son he had chosen. While Adrian Vance, the legitimate heir, squandered his youth on yachts and parties, failing at prestigious universities and managing small Atlas Group divisions with negligent incompetence, Sofia graduated with dual honors from Harvard, finance and computer science, secretly working for the very investment fund Richard feared. She had become a shadow in the market, an anonymous consultant known for dismantling corrupt corporations. She was the personification of efficiency, with the coldness of someone who has nothing to lose and everything to gain. The act of infiltration began insidiously 5 years ago. Sofia used her tech expertise to create vulnerabilities within the Atlas Group's cybersecurity system, initially as a third-party consultant under the alias Ava Sterling. She planted digital backdoors that ensured her unrestricted access to the company's deepest secrets. Richard, always concerned with external attacks, ignored warnings about internal fragility, blindly trusting Adrian, who was nominally the head of IT. Richard's arrogance in relying on his chosen son's mediocrity was the first knife Sofia twisted. Over those years, Sofia, in her multiple identities, was systematically weakening the Atlas Group's financial foundations. She anonymously leaked information about risky projects to regulators. She purchased small chunks of the company's debt through offshore funds, and she exposed the corruption of executives loyal to Richard, forcing them out in controlled scandals. With every exit, every investigation, the company bled, but Richard, in his myopia, blamed the issues on market volatility or jealous competitors. He was blinded by the certainty of his own legacy and his contempt for anyone who was not his son. The peak of the chaos, the trigger for the final confrontation, came when Richard, desperate to reverse the stock decline, orchestrated a secret acquisition of a failed competitor to inject life into the Atlas Group. The project, incompetently led by Adrian, had a fatal flaw. The acquired company was entangled in a massive environmental fraud. Sofia, who had planted the vulnerability in the due diligence system, ensured the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, received the information the exact moment the purchase was finalized. The news exploded like a bomb. The Atlas Group faced a multi-billion-dollar fine, nullification of the acquisition, and a criminal investigation for corporate fraud. Shares plummeted 70% in one day. Richard's empire was in total collapse. Richard's last hope was the board. He called an emergency meeting, the air on the 40th floor heavy with the scent of fear and panic. He was desperate yet still arrogant. He tried to sell the idea that Adrian, with an improvised and useless financial plan, could save the company. The board, composed of cautious old men and women, looked at Richard with scorn. They were ready to discard him. It was at that moment that the chairman of the board, a tired, grey-haired man named Mr. Henderson, introduced the only viable solution. Gentlemen, our asset protection fund, which has kept us stable for years, has imposed one condition. They will inject sufficient capital to stabilize the fine and save us from bankruptcy, but only if leadership is immediately transferred to the person they have sent to structure this rescue plan. She is here, and she has our vote. The door opened, and Sofia, in her final and most lethal form, entered the room. She was flawless, a perfectly tailored suit, a glacial composure, and a gaze that cut through metal. She was no longer the intern, she was the general. Richard, sweating profusely, barely looked at her, still consumed by humiliation. He only saw a young, attractive woman who, in his mind, would be easy to manipulate. "Who are you?" he growled, his tone dismissive. "You're the hero of our protection fund? Is your plan better than Adrian's?" Sofia sat down at the end of the table, ignoring Adrian, who looked at her with suspicion and jealousy. She didn't use the soft voice of Ava Sterling. Her voice was authoritative and cold, with the cadence of someone dictating a sentence. She began to dismantle Adrian's plan, not with insults, but with numbers, pointing out the logical flaws and naive assumptions of the plan in a matter of minutes. Richard was stunned by her level of detail and precision. He wondered who had trained her. He looked at Adrian, who was cowering in his seat, realizing that this woman had just exposed his incompetence in a way his father never would. The meeting dragged on for hours. Sofia took command, presenting her rescue plan, which was as brutal as it was effective. She detailed cuts, the sale of non-essential assets, and, crucially, the restructuring of corporate governance, which would strip both Richard and Adrian of any decision-making power. Richard watched her, and a strange familiarity began to plague him. Her eyes, the shape of her jaw, the way she effortlessly wielded power. He tried desperately to link her face to some former lover, some business relationship, but he couldn't. The memory was blocked by his own trauma of rejection. When Sofia finished the presentation and Mr. Henderson proposed the vote to transfer executive leadership to her as part of the fund's agreement, the vote was unanimous. Richard was forced to witness the board he had controlled for years, handing over his empire to a stranger. Richard did not back down. He slammed his hand on the table, the sound echoing in the room. "You won't take my name or my legacy, you adventurer. You think you can walk in here and take everything I built? Who the hell are you, truly? Tell me who sent you to destroy me." Sofia smiled, a smile devoid of warmth but filled with terrifying satisfaction. She slowly stood up and walked to the head of the table, stopping exactly where Richard used to sit. She looked at him, and the fury bottled up for 30 years shone in her eyes. "You want to know who I am, Richard?" she asked, her voice low and laced with venom. She then began repeating the words he had said to her mother 30 years ago, each phrase a punch to Richard's gut. I am your weakness, Richard. The detour you couldn't admit. I am the child you threatened to destroy, should she dare to come into this world. Richard's face went paper white. The memory suppressed for years flooded his mind with a physical pain. He saw Elena in the rain, the check, the threat. Elena, he whispered. Elena Dubois was my mother. And I didn't come back for the money you offered that night, nor your last name. I came back to take your legacy, because you taught me that power is everything, and today the power is mine. Sofia then revealed the last piece of her plan, the silent accumulation of preferred shares, those that gave her total voting power, which she had obtained through complex legal maneuvers that Richard, in his arrogance, never bothered to monitor. She didn't just have the board's vote, she had legal ownership. Richard Vance, the untouchable magnate, slumped into his chair, his voice now a pathetic whisper. You are my daughter. Adrian is... Richard's humiliation was total. He had handed his empire to the daughter he rejected and had relied on the son who was useless. Sofia showed no mercy. Adrian is irrelevant, Richard. He was merely the distraction that allowed me to weaken the Atlas group without you suspecting. Your arrogance in preferring your son, his mediocrity over your daughter, his vision, is the cause of your downfall. And now you are nothing. She then fired him, handing him one final document, a legal restraining order prohibiting him from coming near Novatech or Sofia. Richard Vance was escorted out of his own company, the man who had sacrificed his family for an empire, losing both. Sofia assumed the chairmanship with the Queen's calm. She looked at the board, and her first act was to sign the order to reverse the environmental fraud, pay the fine, and inject Elena's vision into the new Atlas group. The revenge was complete, dignity was restored, and the power was in the hands of the one who truly deserved it. The story of Sofia and Richard is a dark reminder that life's justice is rarely immediate, but it is always implacable. Richard, in his pursuit of a pure legacy, destroyed the purity of his family, and it was that seed of rejection that grew to topple him. Sofia was not motivated by wealth, but by the visceral need to prove that the life Richard tried to erase was, in fact, the most brilliant. And what about you? Do you think Sofia should have revealed herself sooner, giving Richard a chance to repent? Or was the cold, calculated revenge the only way to ensure justice for her mother? Leave your honest comment below. Your opinion on the price of dignity is fundamental to our debate. If this epic narrative of revenge, power and legacy resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button so we can continue to explore the stories life and ambition hold for us. Thank you for watching.